Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hi fans, Lindsay Cortez here, your host of the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. And today we have Stephanie Roth-Goldberg, licensed clinical social worker, certified eating disorder specialist, and psychotherapist. She specializes in eating disorders and athletes. She is the founder of Intuitive Psychotherapy, New York City, a small group of psychotherapy practice focusing on treating eating disorders through an anti-diet lens. Stephanie works with athletes and the intersection of eating disorders and sports. Stephanie, a runner and triathlete herself, is passionate about incorporating movement into eating disorder treatment to help folks feel empowered and connected to their bodies. She regularly presents on the subject of eating disorders and exercise. When Stephanie isn't working, she can be found running around with her 2 children, writing, and triathlon training. Stephanie, I think we are very similar.
Oh, great.
Besides that, I'm not a psychotherapist, but all of your interests and your mission and everything. So I'm so excited to talk to you today and have you share more with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. I first want to just dig into your business because I was really drawn to the name of it, which I know the name is not everything. Like the name of my business is Rise Up Nutrition, which I think is kind of cool, but not everybody even knows that because it's, unless you're my client. But I really like the name of your business, Intuitive Psychotherapy. So can you tell me how you landed on that name and what that even means to be an intuitive psychotherapist?
Yeah. If I'm being totally honest, one of the reasons I landed on the name is New York has really strict laws into what can be a name of a psychotherapy practice. You have to include psychotherapy. It can't be called group unless there's more than one owner. It was like all of these. I got this whole list of things. Yeah. And so then I was thinking, what do I want to communicate within the confines of what I'm, sort of going to be allowed to use as a name? And I was thinking there's so much stigma around mental health and there's so much resistance often to getting help. And I was thinking, the way my practice works and the clinicians that I hire, we try and just meet people where they're at, treat them as they are. I have a pretty diverse group of clinicians as well. And so I was thinking, if someone came and it was non-threatening and something sort of like when I was thinking of a logo, like a light bulb kept coming into my head, which is not what I used. But this idea that you have your intuitive self and thoughts of what you need. And sometimes you just need a therapist to kind of help you get there. So there's that part. And then intuitive eating is also, now it's quite popular. When I named my business that, it wasn't as popular. And at the time, I was one of the only therapists certified in the state of New York as an intuitive eating counselor. So I also wanted to bring that in as well.
Mm-hmm. I read somewhere on your website, I don't have it written down, but I think you had some sort of quote that was, I'm going to botch it, but somewhere along the lines of you already have the answers within you. And, so it makes sense that I think that it's really empowering that, your therapist is just guiding you to the solutions and answers that you already have somewhere. You just have to unlock it. That kind of sounds like your philosophy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And that feels so much better than when we are struggling with mental health to feel like I'm broken or something's wrong with me. It feels so much better. And I believe it's actually the truth that we're not inherently broken. We do have the answers. We do have the power and we just have to figure it out. So
Yeah.
I like your message. So how is a psychotherapist different than a therapist?
It's not. It's really, a psychotherapist is different than a psychologist in nature of degree.
Okay.
So a psychologist, PhD, psychotherapist is any master's level clinician that's licensed to provide therapy.
Okay. Interesting. Because I feel like most people I know are therapists. And so I just never heard that term before.
It's interesting because I'm in the sports world. Whenever I would say to people, I'm a therapist, they would assume I was a physical therapist.
True. Yeah.
So I started using the whole title of psychotherapist because I'm not a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, different types of therapy. Yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah. I had a really funny client interaction. It was like, well over a year ago with one of my clients who like referred to me of like, you're a great therapist. I'm like, I'm your dietitian. I'm not your therapist.
Right.
So she was like, well, you're my food therapist. I was like, okay, yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So you are the psychotherapist working on the mind. Absolutely. So and I'm sure we can like really dig into your story and background more, but just, where did your interest and passion for pursuing a career in this first begin?
My mom was a helper always, and she was always volunteering when we were growing up, and like with the foster care system and a battered women's shelter that we all would volunteer at once a month for as long as I could probably remember. And so I was always sort of interested in how those things ran. And then I had a therapist when I was young who I really loved, and I really enjoyed having that space as a teenager. And then I went to school for criminal justice for undergrad. And in my internship, I was creating all these programs for people coming off parole to get jobs. And the head of the program kept coming up to me and going, I think you'd be a better therapist than you need to go to grad school to be a therapist.
That's funny.
And because he was like, people really like talking to you. And I don't think I was quite as good at the like community outreach that needed to happen, whatever. And so that's sort of how it happened in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then postgraduate, I worked at a practice in Midtown Manhattan, and I was one of the only females, and I kept getting all of these actresses and dancers. And so I felt as though I needed training in eating disorders specifically, as well as that's in my own history. But it kind of, I feel like where I was in Manhattan, that was common to be like, it was sort of near the theater district. So I got specialized training in eating disorders, and I have since gotten years of that. The sports piece happened also naturally in the way that I'm a triathlete. Was very involved in the New York City triathlon community for many, many years. And people would always come to me, physical therapists, doctors that I knew, and say like, do you think they knew I was an eating disorder specialist, and they would ask, do you think this person like has an eating disorder, or have you heard of this thing, the female athlete triad? And I would get these referrals from doctors, PTs, all in the area. And so then I was like, this is work that I love. I love working with athletes. I love helping people recover from eating disorders without feeling like they have to retire from sport, even if they have to take a pause. And so then I went and got some specialized training in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, because I think when it does come to eating disorders and disordered eating, like when people are trying to make that first step for help, it's very often it's like, am I going to see a therapist for help, or am I going to see a dietitian for help? And ideally it's both and working together. But I very often when people are making that first initial, and so it's really good if your dietitian is cued in to some of the mental and cognitive changes and to support that. And it's really good if your therapist has a knowledge and understanding, like you said, of that certification that you got, because there's a huge overlap. And it's also, I think, just bringing light in our conversation. I speak of a lot of different sports and athletes, although as a runner myself, I do speak of running a lot, but those performing arts, there's a huge need for nutrition support and reframing how we think about food and body for people in dance, in ballet, in acting, getting on stage. So I'm sure that, you saw a lot of that in New York City.
Yeah. There was years where I worked with a dance company actually. And that is it is something that's also quite specialized and needs dietitians who understand the needs of dancers and also the culture in dance.
Yeah. It's a tough culture and hours and hours a day of practice, the physical demand on their body, but the culture is very challenging too with, landing with a company, staying with a company, getting certain roles. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which the running culture is, although I feel like we're making a turn for the better in that regard.
Yeah.
Plus runners aren't sort of picked, so to speak, on their body.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the challenge with the performing arts, right? Yeah. I'm just thinking I had a couple dancers a few years ago, but it's actually been a couple years since I've worked with a dancer. So right now, as far as your clientele go, do you still get a lot? Do you work with all sports? What do you see the most of?
I do work with all sports, but I think probably because of where my referral sources are, I tend to get a lot of endurance athletes, and probably because some of the dietitians I work with, I also know, and we run together, or we, used to do triathlon together. And so they also attract those clients themselves. But I have worked with many soccer players, like I said, dancers. I think it depends on the season. And with COVID, I will say,
totally,
I have not gotten referrals until now that sports are back.
Yeah.
But I was working with almost primarily runners or triathletes, interestingly, during COVID. I guess because you could still do it.
Because they kept doing it. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah. So bring us back. You mentioned that disordered eating is a little bit of your story as well. Can you tell us, what that looked like for you or when this was a struggle and how you overcame it?
Yeah, I think it looked, and I think this is true of everyone's story. There's generally a few iterations of how disordered eating or eating disorders play out. And oftentimes people think that they're recovered, but really what's typical and what happened with me is I thought I was recovered, but really then they go into a period of pretty extreme orthorexia. And so for me, I thought I had recovered from a pretty restrictive eating disorder. And for years, I spent really eating, quote unquote, clean. And I really thought that was great. Like I was eating. And I didn't eat gluten, actually. It's shocking to me now, for over 15 years.
Wow.
A friend of mine was diagnosed with celiac. And I was like, oh, that maybe my stomach always hurts because maybe I have something going on. And I stopped eating gluten and I decided I shouldn't eat it for over a decade. But then when I started getting more competitive in my running, actually, I was continuously injured. I have years of being in an injury cycle. And I finally got to the right doctors, figured out what was going on. I had lost a fair amount of bone density. And a doctor really, had set me up with a specific sports nutritionist. But I think having this team of specialists really made me realize all of this clean eating and not eating grains and this and that, is actually still quite disordered. And I'm still not eating enough because I was terrified of white carbohydrates. And so that's how I think it really took a good number of injuries for me to recognize that what I thought was recovered was still really, really disordered and restrictive.
So it's so interesting listening to hear you say this because I can draw parallels to myself and my journey too. The difference being that as I was going through it, I never even identified as having an eating disorder, or therefore, since I didn't identify as having one, I didn't identify as being recovered either. But I have these different iterations, right, of being so strict, restrictive, calorie counting in high school to then dropping that, but then having some compensation purging issues in college and then dropping that, but then I also removed gluten for a couple of years and didn't touch fast food for a decade type of thing, just super. I thought I was good. And in hindsight now, I'm no, I was still underfueling at that time. So there's these different iterations, which is interesting, even in my own journeys, kind of similar to yours. Oh my God, I can crush gluten now. I can eat a whole pizza, not have any,
right.
That wasn't really a problem for me and my body. The problem was I was probably not fully healed and healthy at that time. And so it's interesting, how in hindsight we can reflect and, like you were saying, you thought you were recovered, but then there was something else. And even in my journey, I have these different iterations along it.
Yeah. And I've been working with eating disorders now for over a decade at this point, and I can think of 2 cases I've worked with, which is, again, a small sample size, where there wasn't a story of like, oh, first I was anorexic and then I was bulimic, or I was bulimic and then I, only ate clean. Like there's always some version of, and people do feel better. It's some difference and some freedom from what they felt they were trapped in. But yeah, it's not really recovery.
But I think that's great to highlight, and not to plant a seed in anybody's head to expect that, but just normalize that there are these different phases and stages, and to still give yourself credit for the progress you've made, and then be motivated to continue working on that progress, right? And like keep seeing new progress. That it's not that this will be here forever. It's just different stages. I think that's how I'm interpreting it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what are some ways that you yourself, just as a therapist working with athletes with disordered eating and maybe seeing them in different phases of what's going on and everything, like this might be too loaded of a question, but what are some of the ways in which you can actually help them, and, tactics or techniques that you really specialize in and think is crucial to recovery?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I think one thing that I will say about myself is that generally when people come to me, whether it's because I talk about being an athlete, or again, like the people that refer to me often are referring to me and they'll say something like, oh, this person is also an athlete. And that will make someone feel, I think, safer coming in, because a lot of times people with disordered eating or eating disorders are told to sort of, just stop running and then you wouldn't need so much food, or, take a season off of any sport.
Not so easy to do.
Right. And so I think there's something, and I think this is true of any therapist with any lived experience, of knowing that someone understands an aspect of you that is really important. And while that's not a technique, at all, I think in therapy, first you have to feel safe with your therapist to have any progress. One of the things I work with people almost immediately is sort of recognizing their own food rules and really having folks like write it down. Because people won't recognize a food rule, for example, might be, oh, yogurt is a breakfast food, not a snack food or something, right?
And people can be really subtle like that,
Yeah. And then there's rigidity there that people might not recognize as rigid. And so that's one of the first things I try and do, because it helps us recognize our own mind and how we think about things and where people might be restricting that isn't, again, so obvious.
Yeah. This is fun. I do this with my clients too. And I just have to say, me, myself, it's so fun that I keep doing it with my clients, because throughout the years, I pick up on these for myself too. And I will sit here today and say, I do not have any food rules. And then suddenly things like creep up, or you're like, whoa, like, yeah, why aren't I allowing myself to have yogurt at dinner time or something, And it's like, so we have those obvious food rules of, don't eat bread or something like that. And it's like, okay, get over it. But then I get this one from clients all the time of like, they break down their fear of bread. They break down their fear of carbohydrates. They're eating carbs, they're eating bread, but like, it's hard for them to eat bread in the morning with toast and a sandwich at lunch.
Yes.
It's
yes.
Like, isn't that a common one? It's like, you can, a carb is a carb. You can eat bread at breakfast and bread at lunch. And so it's really interesting. I always share with my clients. So I guess I'll share it on the podcast now. Like, one of my last food rules that I broke that I didn't even know I had was a couple years ago. Like, my husband just questioned me of like, why don't we have mayonnaise in the house? And I was like, I don't know. I just never buy it. That was something that like years and years and years ago, I stopped buying mayonnaise and never allowed myself to do it again. And I didn't have a fear of it. So I could, but I hadn't broken it, and I'm proud to say we always have mayonnaise in the house now.
Yeah. I mean, right. I would also tell you I have really no food rules, but I do. And my kids are obviously quite older than yours, but not old. But I struggle. And that's where I recognize it now. Like my son would eat Fruit Loops for breakfast every single day if he could. And sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't. But I think it was last week or something, I said to my partner, like, I don't know why I think pancakes with syrup is any better than Fruit Loops. Like, truly, there's a lot of sugar, like, who cares? But so even those things that I don't think of myself as having food rules. I do sort of check myself, like cereal is, I don't know, in my head, shouldn't be eaten every day for breakfast, but that's really not true.
Hey fans, I hope you are enjoying this conversation so far, and we'll be back to it in just a moment. But first, I want to pause and let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Female Athlete System of Transformation, aka the Fast Track to overcome disordered eating and use food as fuel to perform at your highest level. The Female Athlete System of Transformation is my unique program and proven systems to guide female athletes to understanding and implementing the proper nutrition for their sport, life, and health. Myself and my team of registered sports dietitians work one-on-one with clients to address their unique needs and counsel them through the nutritional and behavioral changes needed. Many female athletes who resonate with disordered eating, mental guilt around food and body, relative energy deficiency in sport or female athlete triad, amenorrhea, repeat injuries due to negligent nutrition, or frankly, just a lack of knowledge and understanding on their fueling needs, have seen incredible success in the Fast Track. After years of working as a sports RD, I've compiled the most effective ways for female athletes to learn nutrition, be supported, be challenged, and ultimately find their success with fueling as fast as possible. So don't wait another day. Get to your goals faster by joining the Female Athlete System of Transformation. Look in the show notes or head to the website to book a free call and learn more. Okay, now let's get you back to the conversation. Enjoy. So it's good to always keep, even us as the professionals, to just keep challenging, because if we can go to that extent in challenging ourselves, that we can challenge our clients with that. And yeah, I hope that our listeners think about this, of like these beliefs that we have surrounding food, and why is it there, and where did it come from, and does it need to be,
Yeah. And then, right. And sort of the follow-up to that I have people do, and this is really a difficult exercise for people, is I have them, I say, like, what if to infinity. So you say, like, okay, what if you ate whatever, right? Toast for breakfast and a sandwich for lunch. Maybe their fear comes up. And then I say, okay, so what if that happens? And then what if that happens, right? And like you follow it enough that it really begins to break down and not make sense. Or you can recognize what is underneath the fear of, like, what might just seem like toast for breakfast and sandwich for lunch is probably some greater, and often with my clients, it's a body image issue. But so recognizing it, and then sort of recognizing where its etiology comes from in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I think having a therapist to figure out, the root of all of this, and to keep questioning, keep that conversation going, to get to the root, figure out the etiology is so important. Can we talk about that for a minute? I guess, the etiology of disordered eating, I always say it can be for 1,000 different reasons or no reason at all. But like you said, body image is at the root of a lot of this. What are some other things in your practice that is kind of have popped up in your experience as the root of struggles with eating?
I mean, at the root of a lot of it is your primary caregivers, and particularly for people who grew up in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, or even the early 2000s, right? And now, but there was your mom or whoever raised you was probably always on a diet. And so we learn to love our body. We learn our internal dialogues from our primary caregivers. So if you have a parent who's constantly thinking that their body isn't good enough, you sort of begin to reflect on, well, I look like that parent, or, oh, my body doesn't look like the way that, this person's saying it's supposed to. And so some of that happens really early on, and in our internal dialogue that we're not even aware of. So that's another big area, and having to sort of sort through what one's beliefs are and what they were taught and whose thought is some things. Oftentimes we have thoughts, and if we break them down, there's someone else's thought, like our parent, most likely.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I see it all the time, and it'll be interesting. Dieting has not gone away, but it does morph over time. So it'll be interesting, because right now, like it's 2022, we're seeing the effects of, maybe people whose parents, in the 80s, 90s, 2000s are dieting. So I wonder what kind of the next generation, because right back then it was these very like just low fat, low calorie dieting and targeted towards weight loss. And those still exist, unfortunately. But we're also seeing this trend right now of dieting. It's marketed for sports nutrition. I hate that. Right? Yeah. Performance, keto for performance, intermittent fasting for performance. And it's not. Those are not for performance. Those are not what athletes are doing or should do. But it's like the terminology has changed, but it's still a diet, and it's still diet culture. And I just wonder, I don't know what this will morph into. But with that being said, you have a very anti-diet approach. Can you tell us a bit more about just how you prioritize like food freedom and flexibility within your approach with your clients?
Yeah. It's great having this conversation with a dietitian, because I think I always try and encourage everyone I work with, if I don't, depending on where they are in their journey, to have a dietitian, because I think, as we were saying before, there's this idea of I can help figure out what's going on, what's the fear around eating food, what happens when you do eat it, but having someone be the guide and give them permission from the scientific standpoint, from, wearing your professional hat as a dietitian, is so useful also. But what we know about diets is that they fail. There's a lot of research that shows that diets lead to eating disorders and disordered eating. And I firmly believe that you cannot recover from an eating disorder and be recovered and still have a diet mentality.
Well, that's the first step of intuitive eating, which you're certified in, is to reject that diet mentality. That's the very first step.
Right. And I think sometimes you have to kind of work through that as you're working through the other steps of intuitive eating.
Yeah.
And it's complicated with athletes, because there is nutrition that is needed. And so you can't throw everything out the window. But within that, you can allow yourself to eat what you want. You can, I think one of the biggest things with women in particular is when we begin to see hunger as also a desire. That's really important. Like if I want to eat anything, it might be that I'm hungry, but it might also be that I have a taste preference for that and a desire. And I don't have to shut it down just because whatever diet culture tells me I need to do. Because I think as women, we are taught so often to like repress a lot of our desires and remain small in all aspects. But I think, so in an intuitive eating sort of way, I think the first thing is rejecting all of the diet rules and figuring out, like we were just saying, what those are for someone. And then with athletes also and also important for everyone in an anti-diet approach is like, it doesn't matter what anyone else around you is eating. It doesn't matter how often they fuel on a run. That doesn't mean that you should follow that. And so really tuning in and embodying yourself and your needs and tuning into what your body feels like is also, I think, sort of the key to having a successfully anti-diet life.
Mm-hmm. That's what it has to be, an anti-diet life. In my programming, I must have said to one of my clients, like, I will never go on a diet again. And I guess because I said it so strongly because it's the truth, but she was still she's still processing that and figuring out okay, this is a commitment for my life to go on this path of not I have to commit that I'm going to go down this path of freedom with my food and not going down, not allowing herself to revisit, like the what if, because that's what always lingers. Well, just what if I just do this one more diet? What if, what if this is the one that really works? What if this is the one that's as good as everybody's saying it is?
Right. Well, and I think, the other thing about anti-diet is you also then have to accept your body and, sort of take the focus off what you look like. Because even in the what if this is the thing that works, you're still trying to manipulate your body in some way, right? So it also, in addition to starting with rejecting your diet rules, it's also starting with accepting your body.
Yeah. Where can people start with that? How do people start accepting their body?
Yeah. And also I should say, as someone in a small body, it's generally easier for someone in a smaller body to begin accepting their body than it is for someone in a larger body. However, I always say one of the first things is clean out your closet. If you have clothes that don't fit and are not comfortable, donate them, sell them, do whatever, because that's you're holding on to some hope back to your sort of what if. And also wear clothes that are comfortable so that you're not constantly paying attention to your body. If you wear pants that are too tight, you're moving around all day and you're hyper aware of it.
Yeah.
So even though that might not seem drastic, it's actually a really good exercise for people.
It is, because that's your everyday of putting on clothes. We live in a society where we wear clothes. So that is an everyday thing. And if you can remove the negativity associated with that process and of choosing your clothes for the day and also then wearing it, that is it feels so much better. I do this regularly, but I also just did it a few weeks ago. My body has changed post pregnancy, and it's a lifetime of bodies changing. They change all the time, and it's just what, just clean it out, put it in bags, donate to Goodwill, sell on Facebook Marketplace, and you're doing something good for yourself and for others in the process.
Yeah. I always feel good. We have a really active buy nothing, sell nothing Facebook group in my town.
Oh, cool.
And so I generally post there, and I feel like people need stuff. And so I'm so happy that I'm not using this and you can make use of it.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, though, it also, to begin to work on body image, you do have to work on enjoying your food and enjoying the way you are inhabiting your body, because those two go hand in hand too. If you're eating food, often diet food doesn't taste good. It's not satisfying. But if you eat something and you get pleasure out of that, you can focus on that instead of the negative body image talk. So you kind of turn the volume up on one thought and turn it down on the other. So you can recognize, in order to meet my needs, I can't really focus on manipulating my body.
And focusing on, I think we can talk about all the different roles that food has in your life, and food is fuel as an athlete, but food is also a gift you can give yourself, and it can be a form of self-care and of self-love. And I think just as you were kind of with body acceptance and enjoying your food, seeing food as a form of self-love and self-care, and it's a gift that you can give yourself, I think is something to tap into that can help there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think as athletes, in some ways, I think we have a leg up on body image because we can focus on being grateful for what our bodies can do and what we love to do, and all of the pleasure we get out of doing that thing because our body allows us to continue that. I think in that way, it's easier to focus on what one's body can do as opposed to what one's body looks like. But that, if you're not in a place where you have exercise or movement that you enjoy, that's not always so easy.
Yeah, totally. So digging into the root cause and etiology again. So we've kind of covered, body image, work there needs to be done. We covered kind of our beliefs around food and body, maybe based off of where we learned it from, other people, our primary caregiver growing up. And I feel like kind of these are two off the top of my head that I see in my work, is that a lot of people, the etiology, maybe if they're eating struggles, might be coming from, I guess I'll just say just the especially with our athletes, the desire to be perfect, be amazing, excel, or kind of drawing that line with exercise addiction. And then as a second one that I see a lot is just trauma, going through some sort of traumatic event, right?
Yes, I think trauma is a big one, particularly if there is early childhood trauma. You might never learn to trust your body, depending on what it is. So if abuse is involved, often you want to disengage from the feelings in your body. And so you do that, and you also then shut off feelings of hunger, and that gives you perhaps some control over your body where you may not have had control previously. And it can be especially difficult to inhabit one's body when there has been a traumatic event or a series of traumatic events. It's not a safe space.
Yeah, I think this one is huge to highlight because, and this is where your work is just so valuable and much needed, is when the root of eating struggles is coming from a traumatic experience. And I would even, if anybody's listening, like just reflect on your life, because trauma isn't just one thing, right? Like it's whatever's traumatic to you or at that time in your life. So there's very often clients I'm working with that like kind of describe an event in their life and kind of brush it off like it was no big deal. And I'm the one sitting over here being like, wait a second. This is, maybe it was when you were 7. And so as a 30-year-old, you're like, I was just a kid. But like, no, this was a thing when you were 7. That meant everything,
Right. Yeah. Another exercise I do with people to also sort of understand if there is something like you're saying that's traumatic to them, but they may not recognize as a traumatic event if it wasn't, one big event, or is sort of, I like to do a timeline of when, like a body image timeline, when they became aware of their body. What did that mean? What does that look like? And then what else was going on when you make this timeline at those times? And you could do the same with sort of, it goes hand in hand with your memories of food. What was food like? How was dinner? When did you begin to get to choose what you ate versus what, your parents chose for you? And oftentimes there you can uncover some things that people might not recognize that affected them.
I love that question of when did you first become aware of your body? Because this is actually a topic that I've been meaning to do a solo podcast episode on for like over a year, and I haven't because it's a question that I asked myself, and I don't have any plans to do it anytime soon, the podcast episode. So I guess I'll just say it right now. Mine is when I was a young gymnast, and I don't know exactly my age, but I was very young. I started gymnastics at 6 or 7. So I must have been anywhere between 7 and 10 when this happened. And I just want to share it. My mom brought me to a specialty store to buy a new leotard. And I was so excited that my mom was going to buy me a new Leo, like that's always exciting. What are you going to wear to practice? A new Leo. And it was special because I have siblings and I had a lot of hand-me-downs. So it was special to get something new. And I picked out this one that was like red, white, and blue, like splatters. It was really cool. I think it was kind of like fireworks. And the very first day that I wore it to practice, somebody was like, what is it? The 4th of July? And it wasn't. And I like never wore it again after that because I instantly was so self-conscious about, wow, people like judge what I'm wearing.
Right.
And I don't know why I still get sad about this story, Stephanie. I still get sad because then I feel like my mom kept asking me like, why aren't you wearing your new Leo? And I like never told her. And then I felt so much guilt that I wasn't wearing this gift, but I also couldn't wear it. And I was so self-conscious. And that's my first memory of ever being aware of my body and that other people were looking.
Well, I think it's also interesting that you kept it a secret, like you couldn't tell your mom or you didn't want to tell your mom why.
I felt guilt because she bought me something and then I didn't wear it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is a therapy session because now I just have this other memory. This came up another time when my mom bought me shorts, running shorts. Like when I was in college, she bought me running shorts for Christmas. And I didn't like how they looked on me and I like couldn't get myself to wear them. Oh my goodness. I'm having some mental breakthroughs here.
But I think this is actually it's so relevant because this is the other thing that happens, right? Someone made fun of your leotard. You felt really self-conscious about it and it made you sad. And something also triggered your brain to say like, don't tell anyone this story. Just hide the whole story, hide the leotard. And so often young kids don't even give themselves the opportunity to work it out and have someone say, well, that's that kid's problem. They don't recognize how awesome, fireworks on your Leo are. And I think that also begins a whole pattern of feeling shamed in your body because you've kept it a secret, which is often where shame comes from.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I can remember hiding those running shorts in my drawer. And I feel like my mom even asking me, like, why aren't you wearing them? Or just feeling guilt that I wasn't wearing them, but I couldn't get myself to wear them. And yeah, feeling shame there. And then I couldn't get myself to get rid of them either because it was a gift. So I couldn't sell them because they were given to me. And yeah, it's just this whole cycle of shame around that. It's interesting. I need to do a little more thinking on this and probably have a conversation with my mom who listens to this podcast anyway. So she's going to hear it.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think that's true. That's what happens when you think about your first memory of your body is it comes also with this understanding of how did you work that out or not work it out, right? So yeah, it's a great exercise in beginning to think about where these things come from.
Yeah, for sure. Do you, for you, if I can kind of shift and turn this on you now, sorry, where do you think some of your eating struggles like first began, and why was that?
My mom is like queen Weight Watchers. She worked at weight, what it used to be. This may still be true. I have no idea actually. Like if once you lost a certain amount of weight, you were a lifetime member. And then my mom is this kind of person, though, anything she does, people are always like, oh, come work for us or come, do this. And she worked for Weight Watchers my mom's in her mid 70s. And I think she just stopped it maybe 2 years ago or something.
Wow. Yeah.
And to this day, even though my sister and I will like really yell at her, she'll go like, oh, why would you eat that? It's this many points, I'm like, Weight Watchers doesn't even use points anymore. But also my sister grew up in a larger body than mine and my brother's always. And there were years where she was served like a different dinner or meal. And it's interesting because I didn't recognize this till I was much older. Like a lot of my own body image and disordered eating came in the reflection of that. And I think as a kid, my thoughts probably were, oh gosh, I don't want to look like that. I don't want to have to eat, I can't even think of an example, like Jell-O when I'm allowed to eat yogurt. And so for my story, it's so embedded. And my grandmother, my mom's mother, was the same as my mom. And so it's generations of dieters and people who really couldn't accept their bodies.
Mm-hmm. Well, Stephanie, I think you are changing that for the generation following you with your own children. Obviously, you've changed your own relationship with food and body and help other people do that. So I'm sure your children will be a different story than the generations before you.
Yes. And my partner and I are the first to we have like big rules when grandparents come over about what you can say at our table and what you can't. So, yeah.
That's good. Well, and I think that's another great thing, for you as a therapist to work through with your clients is those family dynamics, in just what to say, what not to say, where are your boundaries, and especially just your own personal example too, of like with a sibling with a different body experience and therefore different dieting experience and how that rubbed off on you. I do see this happening a lot with my clients that have many clients, their older sibling had issues with food and it's rubbing off on them. And so these are important dynamics to work through with people. Just it's not just you and what you saw on social media affecting your eating. That's a huge piece. Yeah. But it's huge. Also, it's huge, but it's also family dynamics. What's being said in the household at the dinner table? What are your siblings going through?
Yeah. And how do you have boundaries? I think first it's sometimes teaching people that boundaries are okay, let alone how to set them and maintain them.
Yeah.
And I think also family, and then when you're working with folks who, and this is less common now, obviously, working in an office, I think office dynamics can be so challenging.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, yeah. But it's how do you set these boundaries everywhere? And what are your boundaries?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I could keep talking to you all day, Stephanie. And we hardly even talked about you and like your running and triathlons, right? Do triathlons? Yeah. You did an Ironman.
Yes.
Ironmans blow my mind.
I just can't wait for my kids to be a little older so I can be on my bike for that many hours.
Yeah. When was your Ironman? Was it prior to kids or?
Prior.
It was. Yeah. How old are your kids?
2 and 4.
Okay. Yeah. I think my son is only 4 months old, but still I'm like, I'm literally doing this reflection of like, okay, like, is it going to be 10 years until I race again?
I will say I had so much fun doing so many stroller miles which is a different thing. It is, but so you'll get there.
Yeah. I actually went on a stroller run today and it was really nice because I've been just slowly building myself up. And sometimes the stroller runs are not fun because they're hard. And then today, they're hard and they're slower and the baby cries halfway through.
Right.
But today we had a really great one. And I actually like went to a trail to go do it. And I thought to myself, like, this is nice, like sure, running isn't what it was, 2 years ago or whatever, but like, I'm still grateful for this experience right now.
Yeah. And I will say some of my closest mom friends are my closest run friends. And so those morning runs now often are like, oh, did so-and-so sleep through the night? And then, it's like so nice how it evolves with you.
Yeah,
too.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I got to find what I have running friends and I have mom friends. I need to connect the two. Right. Yeah. Well, once your kids are older, like, do you hope to do Ironmans again or just kind of keeping it open? Whatever.
Oh no, I'm itching to do another one. I actually was going to sign up for a 70.3 this summer.
Yeah.
What I haven't found, I moved during the pandemic, and what I haven't found are friends who cycle. And so I can't seem to get the mileage in. And my partner and I have hired babysitters so we can go on bike rides, but that's not a consistent thing.
Yeah.
So first, I think I need some friends who ride bikes. And then I think in a few years, I'll do another one. I hope to.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I know we're connected on social media, so I'll be sure to follow along, not only with all your amazing psychotherapy advice to clients, but also with your journey as an athlete yourself and, having you being, fueled and strong, hopefully injury-free. I know sometimes those injuries from our past can linger, but you're in a good place. And yeah.
Yeah. I actually am just coming off an injury, which was shocking. It had been 8 years, but it's been a different experience and a good learning experience because I have the coping skills that it was okay.
Yeah. That could be a whole nother podcast episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, I end every recording with the same questions for every guest. So are you ready for them?
Yes.
Stephanie, if there's one food you could eat every single day for the rest of your life and never get sick of it, what would it be?
Yeah, I was struggling with how I was going to answer this one. It's between bagels and chocolate. I don't know that I have an answer. Probably chocolate, I guess, but bagels is a close second.
Yep. Oh, I know. I could always list like a bunch of foods, but okay, we'll go with chocolate. Yeah, chocolate sounds, and if I think on it, I'm like, do I go a day without chocolate? I'm probably already doing that.
Right. Well, those are the two foods I eat also almost every day. So
yeah, you have proof.
Yes.
Stephanie, what's your favorite sport to participate in?
Triathlon or maybe running at this point because it's the most accessible for me.
Yeah. How about as a spectator?
This is funny. I was thinking about this one too. The Tour de France in my house is like the Super Bowl. We're not huge sports fans, so we do watch, like, we love the Tour de France. I do love watching swimming when it's on and track. So I was like, oh, I'm so boring. I stay within these confines. But, like, I grew up going to baseball games and hockey games, and I'm excited to start, my kids are old enough now that we can take them to some of those. So
yeah. That's fun. Yeah, but the Tour de France is awesome, and something you can really get into. It's kind of like, it's kind of like the Olympics. Like you can get into it for a couple weeks,
Yeah, totally. And it's more frequent than the Olympics. So it is fun.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And last question, if there's a female athlete out there that you think is inspiring, a role model, or especially fierce, fit, and fueled, who would that be and why?
Yeah, I was conflicted on this one. So I think Simone Biles, because of how she came out about mental health in the Olympics, is someone I have always thought she's an incredible athlete and person. But I think her, and then Molly Seidel, I'm a big fan of. She talks a lot about her mental health and her struggles. And even just in Boston 2 weeks ago or last week, and I think she's really human. And so I love that. I love when people are just relatable.
Yeah. And with eating too.
Yes.
She's been a great role model in speaking out for that too.
Yes, exactly. That's why I one day really hope she writes a book. But
yeah. Well, that's beautiful. Well, thank you, Stephanie. And I know you were on Instagram at Embodied Psychotherapist and your website, intuitivepsychotherapynyc.com. Any other ways that people can reach out, follow you? Or those are your two main outlets?
Those are my two main. Yeah.
Yeah. Great Instagram account. I've been following, I don't even know how we got to following each other, but
I don't either, actually.
Yeah. I've been following you for a while now. So it's good stuff.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much. This was really great. Thank you for having me on.
It was great. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
I really hope you enjoyed that episode and thanks for listening. But before I let you go, I have free resources that you can have access to right away, right now, so that you can start fueling your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. First, I have your Red S recovery race. If you've ever wondered if you might be struggling with Red S, curious to learn more, or know you have Red S and are looking to recover fast, then you can head to www.riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS and download the Red S Recovery Race. See how you place and figure out the next steps to recovery. Plus, while there, I have a few other great resources for you, including 3 nutrition secrets that every elite athlete swears by, and access to our private Facebook community, Female Athlete Nutrition. So again, to gain access to all of this, head to riseupnutritionrun.com/RedS. That's /REDS. And you can gain access and get the help you need fast. Too many girls and women and female athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. Become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and I'll see you next time.